Hello. Hello. Oh my God. Hello. Can anybody see me? Can anybody hear me? All right. Okay, so I just kind of saw that I was live on YouTube. And now I'm trying to find out whether or not you can see me on. There we go. I'm going to share it. Okay. Do I have my act together? Grand Rising, everybody. Welcome to today's Sunday service, this beautiful June 1st. Oh my God, it is June. That's ridiculous. Today, we are going to be talking about American folk magic. So I'm the kind of person that I just talk. I this morning I woke up about 2 hours ago, made my coffee, sat down, opened up my computer, said I'm going to take some notes. I'm going to refresh myself on some required reading to do this particular service. And I didn't do it. I just looked at everything because that's how I am. Today, we're going to be talking about folk magic practices, specifically in the United States. Welcome to the Progressive Charismatic Spiritualist Church of All Saints. We are a spiritualist church. And we are inclined to maintain, I guess you could say, a Christ-centered or Christ consciousness-centered practice. We do use the Bible a lot. We talk a lot of shit about the Bible. We talk a lot of shit about Paul. We just talk a lot of shit, or I talk a lot of shit. This is a church like no other. This is not your mom and dad's church. So I kind of just want to talk about myself for a second. I got nothing to do and all day to do it. This little live might turn out to be longer than an hour. But you know what? I signed up for it, and so I'm here. I was born and raised in Hampton Roads, Virginia, which is right on the border of North Carolina on the East Coast. Big military town, big Navy town. And, Williamsburg, Virginia, Jamestown, and all of those early colonies, English and Irish colonies that started colonizing the United States. Most all of those people were Pilgrims and Puritans, and also in New England. And what happened over time was the folk magic practices that were practiced by the English, the Irish, the Scottish, and indeed German peoples migrated over to the United States in the 18th century heavily because of all kinds of fuckery that was going on in Europe. And so I have to, the reason why I'm telling you about like who I am and what my history is because it will explain to you what this church is about, okay? My mom's Puerto Rican, my dad is English and Irish, and indeed my West African ancestors come from my father's side of the family, okay, from Southern Virginia. I also have African American ancestors that were in other parts of the South that had migrated to the East Coast during some of the Great Migration. So when I grew up in a conservative Christian cult, and who I was as a person was not in alignment with that church and with that cult. I'm queer, whatever that means. I don't even know what that means, to be honest with you. But I was excommunicated or disfellowshipped out of that church. And when I got kicked out of that church, I went to college and I started studying the world's religions. I started studying Western philosophy. And learned a lot about the world. I grew up in a very closeted, sheltered environment. And so I didn't know anything about the world. And I didn't know anything about Christianity in general. I'm gonna go ahead and say it. I was born and raised a Jehovah's Witness. Okay. And so anything that existed outside of the Watchtower Society, okay, I had absolutely no clue about until I was about the age of 22, when I left that church, or when they kicked me out, and I went to college, and I started learning about the world's religions. I'm getting off to a really slow start. I promise you that things are going to get rolling. I have all kinds of stuff I want to show you. Today, I actually want to teach you how to make homemade Florida water. So you never have to buy homemade Florida water ever again from a store or from a Botanica. In order to understand American folk magic practices, we have to go back. We're gonna go back 4,000 years, 5,000 years. We're gonna go back into way back into history, because I'm gonna say things that are unpopular today for the magical community, for the occult community, and for people who consider themselves witches. I just want to go ahead and put this out there, that witchcraft has never been considered a positive thing for the most part in most of human history, because witchcraft has always been associated with negativity, necromancy, conjurations of the dead, for malevolent purposes, and also for poisons and other things. So it wasn't until Gerald Gardner introduced the concept of Wicca, okay, or witchcraft, which is really neo-paganism. In the 1960s and 70s, the sexual revolution happened. The women's rights movement got really, really, really fired up. A lot of women were burning their bras. A lot of women were re-embracing divine feminine, goddess spirituality. Dianic witches came out. LGBTQ plus rights started emerging, okay? And there was the counterculture that rebelled against the patriarchal, indeed, Christian establishment. So I have several books that I had bought by Silver Ravenwolf, had actually published a book called American Folk Magic. I wanted to see what she had to say. I also, Llewellyn produced a book called Folk Magic Practices in North America. And the bias in these books towards pagan practices is a disservice to our ancestors and what actually happened. So I'm here to set the record straight from my understanding and my practice and my studies. Let's be really clear. If you don't read books and you don't study, you're going to be stupid for the rest of your life. You're never going to know anything about the world. You're not going to understand how the world works. You're not going to have a practice. You're not going to have a magical practice because it's not be based in anything. Okay? People who practice magic, people that practice ceremony and ritual, people that practice these folk magic practices, we have to study and we have to learn these things. You also need to understand history if you're going to be educated, because you can't learn magic off of TikTok. I'm going to say that one more fucking time for anybody that didn't hear me the first time. You cannot learn magic off of TikTok. It is impossible. That is not how you study. That is not how you learn how to practice these things. You learn how to practice these things because you meet and hang out with the people that practice them in groups. Or you commit yourself to study, reading, educating yourself, okay, and learning these things through books and through experimentation. But you do not learn this stuff off of social media by watching a YouTube video or listening to some stupid ass witch bitch on TikTok, on Witch Talk, that started practicing witchcraft during the pandemic. I can't tell you. See, I'm in a mood. I'm in a real mood today. I can't tell you how many readings I've given to women over the past 4 years, 5 years, that came to me and said, I had a spiritual awakening during COVID. And what that really means is they woke up to how shitty their life was and how miserable they were with their life. And for some reason, there was this shift towards witchcraft. And, you know, there's been this huge shift politically by women to the left and leftist progressive politics, which I'm not saying is right or wrong, because I'm very quickly becoming non-political and I'm independent. Good morning, Grand Rising. It is good to see you, Sage. I'm just getting warmed up. I'm just getting started. Hold on. I'm getting there, y'all. I'm getting there. It's taking me a minute. It's taking me about 13 minutes to start warming up. But so what I was going to say is that it's very, very difficult to learn anything if you don't read, if you don't study, if you don't do your research, if you don't understand history, and if you don't have people around you that practice this stuff, and mentors. It's important to have mentors like Mama Sunfire, you know, like me, like some other elders in these traditions that have been practicing for longer than a decade. I have been practicing magic for over 20 years. I started practicing magic when I was 22 when I left the church. I'm 45 years old. I've been practicing magic. So it's even though time really doesn't matter. I mean, you can be old and still be a moron, okay? Because people on Witch Talk prove that every single day. However, even people that talk crazy shit on TikTok who have been practicing magic for a prolonged period of time still have a lot of experience, and there's still something to learn. You can always learn something from everyone, even if it's how to do everything wrong. But the point is that you need to be discerning, okay, about the information that you get. Hey, Grand Rising. What's up, Sophia? I'm just getting started. So today what we're talking about is we're talking about folk magic practices in America. But in order to really understand American folk magic practices, we have to go back several thousand years. Okay? Because I'm going to say some unpopular things today with people that might not have studied or done research. American folk magic practices, and I'm not talking about I haven't gotten to African American practices yet, because that is I'm only going to share about 5% of my understanding because Sophia is the hoodooist and the and I'm primarily going to be talking about Western European magic practices that came over to the United States. So I'm not talking about Afro-Indigenous spirituality necessarily, or diaspora or African American practices. This is primarily going to be talking about where European folk magic practices come from here in the United States. So let's become unpopular very, very, very quickly. For the most part, witchcraft has never been considered a positive thing until recently. Since the 1960s and 70s, sexual revolution, women burning their bras, a re-embracing of the divine feminine, goddess worship, Dianic witchcraft, and all of that. Wicca, okay? Wicca is neo-paganism. Wicca was really born from a cultural rebellion against social norms. And it's a romanticizing of European pagan cultures. And Wicca doesn't just pull from, let's say, one Northwestern European pagan culture. It pulls from a bunch of them. It's very eclectic in where it draws from, and it even draws from and pulls from other practices that are not European, which is why I don't consider myself a Wiccan. Even though Wicca is kind of like where I started out when I first jumped out of the church. So in order to understand the Western magical tradition, we have to go back to when the Proto-Indo-European and the Indo-European people, that specifically that language group, left or started migration patterns that left the Caspian Pontic steppe and started traveling south down into northern India and Pakistan, and started traveling west up into the Baltics, up into Scandinavia, and then across Europe all the way to the British Isles, okay? Those migration patterns happened over thousands of years, 2,000-3,000 years. Now, I'm going to teach y'all a magical secret, okay? If you want to know where any specific practice comes from, religious or magical practice comes from, you have to follow the language trail. You have to understand how language evolves over long periods of time, and we call that sociolinguistics or linguistics. Because French, Portuguese, German, English, Irish, Scottish, and all of the Indo-European language families all have a common root that go back to those people that left the Pontic Caspian steppe and started migrations, okay? It's called the Indo-European language tree. Those people that went down into northern India and Pakistan, they call that an Indo-Iranian language family tree. Okay, so the Indo-Europeans that started migrating west and south about 6,000 years ago in migration patterns, okay, that northern, I want to get to Pakistan and northern India. That Pakistan and northern India region of the Indo-European peoples that started settling there, that created what we would call today as Hinduism. The Vedas, the Vedic culture, the Brahmins, the priests that practiced the fire ceremonies, that really there was a coming together of the people of southern India and northern India after much turmoil and wars and fighting over territory. What became Brahmanism came from the Indo-Iranian language group of families, and the Vedas are some of the oldest scriptures in the world, one of which is called the Artha Veda. The Artha Veda specifically is a book of incantations and magical spells in order to fight sorcery, fight necromancy, fight witchcraft, get favor of the gods, perform sacrifices, sacrificial acts to the gods, and then also religious mysticism. Okay, those fire ceremonies that you see in Hinduism are the same kinds of fire ceremonies that were done all across Western Europe and all the way up into Scandinavia and Northern Europe, because there are the language of the people and the practices and the concepts, okay, traveled with these people across all of Europe. Do you understand? Am I being clear? Because I feel kind of foggy this morning. I feel like I should have smoked a joint before I started my conversation so that I could be more focused. However, since I did not, we're here. But what I'm trying to point out to you, or what I'm trying to say to you on this Sunday morning, is if you want to understand where any pagan practices, neo-pagan practices originated from, follow the language trail back as far as you can go in order to find out where these concepts come from. So let's be even more clear. This is important. The Indo-European peoples believed in Sky Daddy, Sky Father, All Father. The concept of the pagan All Father or Sky Father, we're talking about Jupiter, Zeus, Brahman. We're talking about all of these Sky Daddy gods, okay? That was very heavy in Indo-European spirituality. Another facet of Indo-European spirituality was the concept of sacrifice and human sacrifice. But what's interesting is that the kind of sacrifices that were the most valued, human sacrifices that were most valued among the European peoples, was the warrior or king that sacrificed themselves on behalf of the people. This is crucially important. Whenever a person was being sacrificed to the gods, in some way, shape, or form, they were exchanging their life on behalf of their tribe, on behalf of their community, on behalf of the world. And they were always deified or elevated to even godlike statuses, okay, within pagan cultures, that warrior culture. So the concept of this patriarchal Sky Daddy, Sky Father God, and the importance of the perfect warrior or the perfect king being sacrificed to the gods as a perfect sacrifice lays the foundation for what is Christianity today. Hey, Zen baby. Good morning, Grand Rising. Thank you for coming today. So what happened is if you want to understand the Bible, if you want to understand Christianity, if you want to understand the rise of Christianity and how Christianity spread throughout Europe, because Christianity is a political organization. Christianity, the religion, is a political organization. It always has been. It always will be. This Christian nationalist movement that you see happening in this country, it's a continuation of the Holy Roman Empire. Roman Empire never died. The Holy Roman Empire never died. It just evolved and changed its face over the past 1,500 years. But what I'm trying to say is that Christianity forms the core of European folk magic practices, not Wicca, not witchcraft. Because the people that practiced folk magic in the United States were Christians. And the people that practiced folk magic over there in Europe were Christians. And let me go over my notes real here. Because what happened over time is those pagan people of Europe, they started abandoning their pagan practices in lieu of this new religion or this new political system that we know as Christianity. So when they say the Druids disappeared, of course they disappeared. They disappeared into monasteries. A lot of Druids became monks, and they were highly educated, and that educated culture, that concept of being educated, actually found its way into Celtic Christianity. So nothing happens overnight. Very slowly but surely over time, European peoples converted to Christianity. Matter of fact, Denmark and Sweden and some of those northern European countries were some of the last to actually accept Christianity, which is why we still have so much Norse pagan culture that can be read about, drawn upon, and reconstructed, because Scandinavia was some of the last countries to be Christianized. They held on to their folk magic practices for a very, very long time. But folk magic has always been practiced for the purpose of survival. So if you want to understand folk magic practices that are practiced in America, we have to differentiate between two versions of Christianity. Because like I said, these people practiced Christianity. They didn't practice anything else. They practiced traditions that came down to them through their family, but these people were Christian. So in the Caribbean, Catholicism ruled. Spanish and French Catholicism ruled. And so what you will see is in Mexico and Hispanic countries, what you'll see that the kind of folk magic practices that are practiced in Mexico, the practices that were done in Puerto Rico, Cuba, Dominican Republic, and now what is Haiti, those were based in Catholic Christian practices. Yes. So the Celts and the Romans had a real time at it. They didn't share the same values. The Celtic people did not share the same values as the Roman Empire. Matter of fact, the Celtic peoples were highly amorous of the Greeks. And for a very, very long time, Celtic culture resembled Greek culture. So the Celts were always pulling from the culture of ancient Greece. And then when Rome came around and started beginning this empire and the spread of this empire, then you have a lot of war, and you're right, conquest, a lot of conquest. Good morning, Jackie. So the Christianity that is practiced primarily in Hispanic countries has been Catholic. And indeed, in Africa, Catholicism and Orthodoxy has always ruled as being foundational for the mixing of indigenous practices with, let's say, the Christian cult or the Christianity that made its way into these places. But in order to understand folk magic practices from a European perspective, you have to understand the Protestant Reformation and the break that happened in Europe between the Catholic Church and everyone else. Because, hold on, let me look at my notes. I shouldn't have made notes. I want to point out something. Yeah, the Danes were highly resistant. I want to point out something. I need everybody to understand that for the most of human history, until quite recently in human history, that the population, the general population, were illiterate. They did not read and they did not write. And most all of culture and most all of, let's say, religious practices and all like folk magic practices, these were things that were handed down verbally. It wasn't until after the Protestant Reformation that Northwestern Europe started putting a more stronger importance on literacy. The printing press, okay, Gutenberg's printing press that was able to mass produce Bibles, okay, and the spread of literacy specifically around scripture and specifically around the Bible dramatically shifted and changed the world. And so literacy was very important to Protestants because the concept or idea in Protestant Christianity, if you don't understand Christian history, you can't understand these magical practices. You have to understand these things. The rise of literacy did a lot of things. What Protestants said was, you should be able to read the Bible for yourself, interpret the Bible for yourself, that God's Holy Spirit should come directly to you, that you should have a direct revelation of Christ in you. These concepts were incredibly revolutionary, and they bucked back at the Catholic Church. The Protestant Reformation was a backlash against the corrupt behavior of the Catholic Church, selling indulgences to get you out of hell. Basically buying your way out of hell and all the other stuff. And remember, in Catholicism, the priest had all of the wisdom, all of the knowledge, were the people that were literate, were the people that understood, that led people in ceremony, ritual ceremony, that were in charge of instructing, okay? Most people that went to the Catholic Church just sat there and listened to what the priest had to say. And whatever the priest said, the people did because they were priests. Do you understand? And when Martin Luther decided to go down and nail his declaration on the door of the Catholic Church, basically that was the turning of the tide, where people said, we can read this Bible for ourselves and we can interpret it ourselves. What did that do? For the most part, what ended up happening was it removed the barrier of a priest between an individual person and God Almighty. This is important. So the power of the Bible was considered very, very important magically Because remember, magic is about power and power structures. So to a common person, this Bible is a grimoire. It is a book of magic. It is a book of power. It is a book that gives you the power of the Holy Spirit. If you possess this Bible and you hold it in your hand and you raise it up and you make declarations on this Bible, you're in a place of power. And so what Protestantism did was it took the individual person and it made them the source of power themselves. And that's where you get the Puritans. That's where you get the Anabaptist. That's where you get the Anglican Church, Episcopals, Methodists, and all the other Protestant denominations. Any Yahoo on the street can stand on a soapbox and hold and steal a Bible out of a hotel room, and stand on a soapbox and preach the Word of God and be empowered by the Holy Spirit. That is a Protestant thing. And that attitude of those people is what shaped American folk magic practices. Because even though these people were Christian, they practiced the hand-down folk practices of their ancestors, because this is ancestral, and they practiced it under a Protestant umbrella or a Protestant worldview, opposed to the Caribbean. Now, here's a very interesting thing. Very interesting thing is, in Catholic countries, in the Caribbean, in North America, of course, in the United States, and also in Mexico and everywhere else, there's still a lot of importance placed on protocol, structure, and priesthoods. And even in religions like Ifa, okay, and other Caribbean spiritual systems outside of Catholicism are still very, very, very priesthood based. I'm going to say some unpopular shit for you guys today. And you can throw tomatoes at the screen. I don't give a fuck. Because this is my church and I can say whatever I want. This is me and Sophia's church. We can say whatever the fuck we want to on this platform. Okay? There's still a very strong importance in Orisha tradition in Cuba that everything has to happen through priests. And that is that we're talking about. We're talking about, colonization is a thing. And so this idea that every time something goes wrong in your life, you have to run to some Ifa priest to try to get help through some Babalao in order to fix your problems. That it doesn't matter if it's a Babalao or a Catholic priest. It's the same fucking idea. That the individual person always has to go to somebody else to get their work done. Always has to go to somebody else to get their spiritual consultation, to find out what the Spirit has to say. And that is a cultural thing. Okay, so in Catholic countries that practice folk magic or practice some other spiritual practice, that concept that priests are still at the top of the food chain in the religion rules. But you'll find a lot of people that practice hoodoo. You'll find a lot of people that practice root work. You'll find a lot of other people that practice conjure traditions and other spiritual systems, okay, in the United States, that just fundamentally reject this idea that there's some kind of hierarchical structure with a priest that can do something they cannot. Because a hoodooist and a root worker and a conjurer and an Appalachian folk magic practitioner, a fairy doctor, or a cunning man, those attitudes are going to be based in more of a Protestant worldview, which is, I have the power to communicate with God. I have the power to communicate with my ancestors. I have the power to make the roots do what I want them to do. I have the power to practice the spiritual and medicinal herbalism. So American culture is incredibly independent. Whether you're black or white, don't matter. American culture is really, really based on the individual. And so that is the biggest break in when it comes to folk magic practices. Do you feel me? There's either the Catholic component or the Protestant component. when it comes to these kinds of practices that are somewhat indigenous and somewhat Christian. I have to use comparison for people to be able to understand. So in a lot of Protestant traditions, folk magic practices, there's not a lot of emphasis put on like saints or the veneration of saints. Whereas in Catholic countries that do venerate the saints, have a lot of saints and a lot of folk saints. You've got Santa Morte. You've got all kinds of saints that do all kinds of things. The Orishas were syncretized with saints and their feast days. And so there's an entire Catholic culture in which folk magic is practiced within a Catholic context. Even the Spiritism, according to Alan Kardec, which is the Spiritism that started in France, became popular in Portugal and Spain, and made its way down into the Caribbean, indeed made its way down into Brazil and South America. And that Alan Kardec Spiritism is pretty much the foundation of what would be a lot of the practices that are in the Caribbean. And I'm not trying to piss anybody off, but even in Cuban Ifa and even in Orisha practice in Cuba and the Caribbean, I'm going to be honest with you. The foundation of those traditions are in Spiritism. Because the Orisha religion that's practiced in the diaspora is different than the one that's practiced in Africa. And the way it's practiced and the way Ifa is practiced in the diaspora is different than the way it's practiced in Africa. In fact, they are two completely different religions. They are not the same religion. They were separated and they evolved under the context of the environment in which they survived. And they evolved differently over hundreds of years. Over hundreds of years, breaks in the theology happened. So when I say that you have to understand Spiritism and the Allan Kardec Spiritism to understand these practices in the diaspora when it comes to Afro-Indigenous practices, like in the Caribbean, I'm not lying, because that forms the foundation of the philosophy for the most part. Matter of fact, traditionally, someone is supposed to practice Espiritismo and study Espiritismo and get that down before they would move into any other practices, into Palo or into Ocha or into Santeria. So for the most part, the foundational practices are Spiritism. And then everything else is built on top of that Spiritism. It's not based on the culture of the people and the indigenous people. Let me say that one more fucking time for anybody that didn't hear me. A lot of the Hispanic culture around Orisha and Ifa is based on a European Spiritism platform, not indigenous. That's an unpopular opinion, but it's facts, mad facts. It's why you see a lot of people that practice Afro-diasporic practices that come out of the Caribbean still so mentally colonized. And I know that's an unpopular thing to say, but this is coming from someone who was not born and raised in Hispanic Orisha culture. Okay. My family, before I was born, converted to Protestant Christianity, and I was raised a Protestant Christian. And coming to, let's say, Santeria, and coming to Palo, and coming to Ifa, I came to the diaspora first. Okay, so because I'm Puerto Rican, I sought out Puerto Rican practitioners that practice these things. And very, very, very quickly, I realized that the practices were not African and not based in indigenous thought, They're primarily based in European Spiritism, which is why my crackerjack ass flew all the way to Nigeria to get initiated in Ifa, because I wanted to be initiated in a truly African traditional practice. So that's what I want you guys to remember. All of the Afro-Indigenous practices that developed in the diaspora, including voodoo, they are African-inspired practices. But Catholicism and Spiritism, according to Alan Kardec, still deeply entrenched within the context of the cosmology. They run parallel with one another. Matter of fact, Santeria can't exist separately from these other practices. They're combined. They integrated over hundreds of years of being practiced side by side with one another. So I said that. Let's see if anybody posts about that on TikTok. I wouldn't know, because fuck TikTok, I'm not on that app. So even if people are running their mouth about me over there and talking about what a horrible person I am, I'd never know, because I never hear about it. Let's see. So what I'm basically saying is that in the United States and in America, the Protestant Christian worldview dominates, whereas in the Caribbean, Mexico, and South America, Catholic Christianity dominates. And it's the difference between this Catholic worldview and this Protestant worldview which affects and shapes the personality and the practices of these folk practices. So if you don't understand the history of Christianity, if you don't understand where Christianity came from, if you don't understand the Protestant Reformation, if you don't understand the differences between the Christianity practiced in North America and South America, then it would be difficult for you to be able to distinguish or understand what you're looking at when you see someone practicing folk magic. I can look at someone's practice and I can know the origin of the practice based on the symbols, based on the iconography that someone is using in their practice. I can tell whether they're heavily Protestant based, whether they're heavily Catholic based, whether they're real Spiritist based, or some other thing. Based on looking at, you should be able to recognize what you're looking at when you look at a spiritual practice. You understand? There are people that are like really, really super eclectic. I'm a super eclectic person, and because I'm Puerto Rican and I have those Catholic ancestors, but I also have these really super Protestant ancestors, my way of practicing falls somewhere in between these two things. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that, because there's nothing wrong with innovation. Innovation is good, not bad. Okay? And so all cultures affect other cultures. We don't live in bubbles. Okay? Cultures are going to affect and cross-pollinate concepts and ideas with one another. Does anybody have any questions, comments, or objections so far? Let me look at my list here. Indo-European migrations and language. The Vedas, the Western religions, abandoned European practices, embrace this new ideology, mixing what was known with innovation, things like old pagan priests disappearing into monasteries and converting to Christianity because it was the new political structure. These practices were not Wiccan in any way, shape, or form, or neo-pagan in any shape or form. Understanding Christianity is understanding Western culture and magic. Difference between the Caribbean, South America, and North American folk magic. Understanding the Protestant Reformation is important. Okay. So you also know what happened in Western Europe over time was a lot of the old local, like say pagan deities, whatever, localized pagan deities were kind of the practice or the veneration kind of got absorbed or wrapped into saint veneration within like the Catholic Church. So like the goddess Brigid became Saint Brigid. So what you'll see in Europe is that a lot of pagan practices that made its way into, I guess you say, survived its way into Christianity. That's the best word. Survived its way into Christianity. A lot of those local pagan deities got replaced by Catholic saints, and the powers associated with those pagan entities were now associated with Catholic saints. So English, Irish, Scottish, and German folk magic practices were brought over in the 18th century into the United States. So the German folk magic practices came into what would be Pennsylvania and New Jersey, down into Maryland, and made it some into Appalachian folk magic. They call it powwow, those practices. You've got fairy doctors that came from Scotland, Ireland. You've got the Scots-Irish. You've got the cunning folk. Cunning magic and cunning folk magic proliferates New England, and also that Jamestown, like I said, indeed, those colonies that happened in Virginia, the English and Irish settlements, colonies that happened in Virginia, a lot of cunning craft practiced. And now we're going to get to the actual practices themselves. Folk magic practices were practiced for the purpose of survival. And I'm going to say another unpopular thing that people don't like, which is, indeed, these folk magic practices, and indeed witchcraft, the foundation of the practice is herbalism. It's plants. And indeed, if you study Palo Mayombe or voodoo, or you know any other kind of indigenous practices, you realize how important the earth is, and you realize how important herbs are, and herbal medicine and herbal magic practices. So most folk magic practices are going to revolve around herbalism. It's called spiritual and medicinal herbalism. And that is across all folk magic styles of practice. So warding and protection against spirits, perceived spirits of illness, being able to protect your crops, be able to protect your cattle and your livestock. Talismans were made, other charms and trinkets. So jewelry, talisman objects, consecrated objects that had carved symbols on them, or drawn symbols on them, or symbols that were weaved into the fabric, were considered to be protectives and charms. And it was protection against necromancers, sorcerers, and witches. Magical grimoires, astrology, and natal charts. People's birth charts or natal charts always been very, very important. Always been very important in the Western magical tradition. A lot of astrology. Most of the spiritual and medicinal herbalist practices are also associated with astrological phenomenon in these European folk magic practices. This is why I'm so into astrology and why I teach herbal astrology. If you guys come and join this church's mentorship program for only $20 a month, you can hang out with me on Thursday nights or any of the other ministers, and you can study astrological and spiritual herbalism with me, and I'll teach you how to do all this shit. But astrology and astrological herbalism is very, 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 I'm not going to say it's unique to European peoples, but I'm saying it proliferates the folk magic practices of European peoples. So there are certain correspondences between planets and signs and plants that have been associated like this for a very, very long time. Goes back to Greece, goes back to the ancient Celts, goes back to the Holy Roman Empire and the practices that were practiced there, and then all of the other folk magic practices in paganism that survived into Christianity. Everything was agriculturally based, like Sophia said. As far as divination is concerned, playing cards and the use of cards, very, very popular form of divination, which is originally people just read a pack of playing cards. Later on, tarot cards were developed, and tarot is a very, 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 that's a Western system of magic. And then you had scrying into mirrors, crystal balls, and other reflective objects, even doing water scrying out of a bowl of water. So to sum up, like the most important practices that you'll find in like cunning craft or fairy doctoring or powwow is going to be talismans, making talismans and charms, doing spiritual herbalism in association with astrological phenomena and in association with planets and signs, and then also divination that's performed through tarot cards, playing cards, and scrying techniques. These are the most important practices that someone would want to study if they wanted to start learning and understanding more of these European folk magic practices. Any questions, comments, objections, or any? I'm not there yet. This is going to be longer than an hour. I'm going over an hour today because it took me about 15 minutes to actually start getting warmed up. And now that I'm warmed up, I'm going to teach you how to make homemade Florida water. You guys want to learn how to make some homemade Florida water? I'm going to make some for you. Reading the weather, reading the sky, and reading the clouds. Yeah, that's awesome. That's an art. That's a real technique. You do that great, Sophia. You do that absolutely great. I can't. I'm the kind of person that needs a pack of tarot cards. You give me a pack of tarot cards, I can divine your entire life for you. Just give me a pack of tarot. Tarot cards are my jam. I have been studying tarot for over 20 years. 23 years now I've been studying the tarot. And so, like, if you ask me to do divination for you, I am not going to reach for anything other than my pack of playing cards, my pack of tarot cards. I am going to tell you what is up with a pack of tarot cards. I am a tarot reader. Yes, I am. Thank you. Thank you. I am very good at it. I'm not going to lie. So there is a bias in the occult community when you buy books talking about folk magic practices, especially with white people, okay? Especially with white people in the occult. I got a lot of problems with you. There's always been this drive for some reason in white people magic where everything has to be about neo-paganism and paganism. So you start reading a book about folk magic practices and all of a sudden, everything's going to turn into Wicca. Okay? And it's not. Wicca is a neo-pagan religion. Wicca is a religion. Wiccans practice witchcraft, but Wicca is a religion. It believes in a god and a goddess and a, great spirit, right? So that great spirit concept, I think in American Wicca was really appropriated in from Native Americans' concepts of the great spirit. Okay, that made it in there. And then you've got this concept of the god and the goddess being the male and the female, yin and yang, Shiva and Shakti concept. That is also something that was brought in from, let's say, some Hinduism. Because don't forget that all of these occultists in the 18th century and the 19th century, specifically the 19th century, and coming into the 20th century, they were all romanticists. They romanticized pagan religions. They romanticized other cultures, and they had no problems going in and appropriating any practices that they wanted into their practices. Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, Thelema, Aleister fucking Crowley, all of those people. They all appropriated other people's practices in order to create what we know today as white witchcraft. Mr. Gardner appropriated a lot of shit. But what's funny is Gerald Gardner was into BDSM, and he was a nudist and a naturist. So his rebellious spirit and his sexual rebellious spirit is what drove the Wicca cult. And if you practice traditional Wicca or Gardnerian Wicca, there is all kinds of kinky BDSM shit that's like thrown in there. And also, when you go, you got to be naked. And traditionally, it was only for heterosexual people, because the Great Rite, they all got together and fucked each other and wife swapped and stuff. So, I mean, like, Gardnerian Wicca was really a counterculture movement, in the same way that Dianic witchcraft and a lot of other goddess-based Wicca and witchcraft in America is based in feminism. So, look, religions are political, and that's just it. Religions have political associations and affiliations. If you practice some kind of spiritual practice, there is a socio-religio-politico involvement going on there. Aleister Crowley, I don't want to talk about him because I don't like him very much. He did a lot of bad things. I do not promote his. Anybody I've ever known that studied his works and practiced his religion were fucked up people. They were all screwed up and had tons of spiritual attachments attached to them, and they're just filthy. They're just spiritually filthy, in my opinion. Very, 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 very. So, I guess what I was going to say is, yeah. So, nudity around religious devotion and worship is quite common within pagan and neo-pagan circles and in Wicca and witchcraft circles, because, to be honest with you, nudity is a really European thing. I've never seen people that like to be as naked as white people. You don't really see that in other cultures. You don't see that in indigenous cultures, and you don't see that in, I don't see that. I haven't seen that in African cultures. I see African cultures that, like, their dress is still scantily clad, but I don't mean nudism in the sense of, hey, let's take off all of our clothes and go lay around in the sun. Or, hey, let's take off all of our clothes and go dance around a bonfire. Or let's all go out into the woods and fuck each other. That is very, very, very European. I mean, I don't know. I'm just saying. I don't know. I don't know. Don't ask me. I don't know. I don't know. Which is fine, because I'm all about it too. You know, I what can I say? I'm all about getting naked and dancing around a bonfire and going out into the woods to do some stuff. To do stuff. So it's cultural. I do believe that is definitely cultural. There's a cultural component to it. There's something that I want to remind everybody in the audience today, which is religions and magic are manifestations of culture. They're manifestations of cultures. You can't separate the spiritual practices from the cultures from which they come from which they're born. And this is the part in where I bust all of the saltines out there on practicing hoodoo. Are you ready for it? I know Sophia has been waiting for this. Sophia's been waiting for me to go off on white people practicing hoodoo, and I'm about to do it. Okay? Let's do it. Let's do it. Let's do it. Hoodoo is African American slave magic practices. Hoodoo was born out of slavery in the United States of America. It is a practice that is ancestral, and it is closed to people who are not Black, because hoodoo and Blackness are synonymous with one another, okay? Because did I freeze? Can you guys still see me and hear me? Can you guys see and hear me okay? Hello? Hello, hello. I'm trying to come back. I saw myself on screen kind of slow down. Did it clear up? Here, let me have some coffee. Am I good now, Zen? Is that better? Did it clear up a little bit? Okay. All right, so let me get back to this whole thing. Hoodoo was born out of African American culture or Black culture because it protected those people, those slaves, from people that look like me and anybody else that's white. Okay? It was a system of magic and spirituality that combined herbalism practices, that also made unions with indigenous people, because whenever people were brought from Africa to the New World, there was a connection that was made, okay, between minorities and oppressed peoples, and there were indigenous people that taught their spiritual and medicinal practices and their understanding of herbal knowledge to slaves in the diaspora, in the Caribbean, and in the United States, because the plants are different. You had to relearn all the plants and how to use them. And so a lot of that knowledge does come from the indigenous people. A lot of plant spirit medicine knowledge comes from the indigenous people that were here, that are here. The people that really own this place, okay? Yeah. So what I was going to say is that there's some Jewish woman out there. What's her name? Catherine Yonderwood. She's written a lot of books about hoodoo, and the truth of the matter is that woman had the balls to literally say that hoodoo practices came from Ireland, or that Irish people had some kind of effect on hoodoo, and that is 100% a lie. Because when I see my Black friends practicing hoodoo and root work, and I went to Africa to actually see for myself how Ifa and Orisha spirituality is practiced in Africa, I'm going to tell you the truth. African spirituality is a very specific thing. And it's practiced a very specific way. And if you hang out with root workers and hoodooists in the southern parts of the United States, I'm talking about Black people, I'm not talking about white people that say they practice hoodoo, you will see that root work in hoodoo is practiced exactly the same way it is practiced in Africa. The language has changed. Some of the tools have changed. What plants that are worked with has changed. But the core soul of hoodoo is African, and it doesn't come from anywhere else. And I know that for a fucking fact, okay? Through years worth of research and direct experience and knowledge, okay? So, and that's why someone who really practices hoodoo or root work can look at somebody that says that they practice hoodoo and know that they're not practicing hoodoo, because these protocols, this knowledge base, these systems are things that were passed down through closed cultures within minority groups in the Black community. And so that's why if you're white, don't practice hoodoo. Practice cunning craft, fairy doctoring. Conjure is still a word, and root work is still a word that can loosely be applied to both. But learn, about your European ancestors' folk magic practices, because those practices are real and they come. So let me break it down for you. My practice, I'm going to tell you what my practice is based in. My practice is based in ancestors. Everything about my spiritual orientation and what I practice is based on my ancestors, not someone else's ancestors. Because when I started doing my genealogy and I started tracing my family tree and I got my DNA test results back and I saw all of the different areas of the world from which my ancestors either migrated from or were stolen from or displaced from in the diaspora in the United States, my practice is based on those practices. They're both based on the practices that came down ancestrally. And so it's my opinion that you should always look at your ancestors first. Ancestor veneration and ancestor work is the core of my practice. It always has been. And any direction I've ever taken in my spiritual practices or things that I've learned about or gotten initiated in have been based on ancestors that I have, whether it's 5%, 10%, 20%, or 50%, okay? Whether it's my 6% of African heritage or my 6% of Taino heritage or my 50% English heritage or the Spanish, French, Portuguese, German, and other admixtures, okay, in the southern parts of the United States and also in Puerto Rico. I have focused on those people. Those are the people that I want to understand. And those are the practices that I practice. It's based on who I feel connected to. It's based on what I know I'm connected to. Now, I'm not a eugenicist, not in any way, shape, or form. I am not into eugenics at all. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm going to tell you this. White people that get involved in Afro-diasporic practices that do not have these ancestors, it's not going to hit the same. If you don't have those ancestors, it's not going to feel the same. It is not going to feel like home. It is not going to feel like a big warm hug from your grandmama, okay? You're not going to feel like you have ownership over it. I fucking own what I do because I practice the spirituality of my ancestors. I can own what I practice because it's mine. It's in me. These spiritual currents, okay? These spiritual concepts exist in an unbroken chain through my lineage, through my blood. And me and Sophia were talking about it the other day. When we talk about what you inherit from your ancestors, you don't just get, type 2 diabetes. You don't just get the alcoholism, that might get, we're talking about ancestral curses now. Right? We're talking about like intergenerational curses on families, like not just the alcoholism or drug and substance abuse, not just like your hereditary physical problems that you have from your ancestors. Your DNA is a chain. It is a link that binds you to every single person who has ever come before you, all the way back to the beginning of evolution, all the way back to the birth of the universe out of the womb of God. God birthed the universe in ecstasy, and we are the children of God. We are all God's children. However, we are also our most recent ancestors. And when I say most recent ancestors, I mean those people who existed over the past 2,000-3,000 years. The past couple of thousand years. Those are your most recent ancestors. Anybody that's lived within the past 1,000 years are your most recent ancestors. And let me tell you something. You are ancestor 2.0 because it was your ancestors that were smart enough to get the hell out of the way when they saw danger. It was your ancestors that were fast enough to run from a lion. It was your ancestors that made choices that preserved their lives and the lives of their offspring. Okay? Your ancestors you are the strongest of all of your ancestors because your ancestors were the strongest people to survive. Do you understand? So I am all of my ancestors and they live in me. And even those people those ancestors that lived and passed on and their spirit has moved on now into the astral plane and moved on into the quantum field, right? Because energy can't be created or destroyed and consciousness just is in everything. So those spirits of the dead, we say dead. We use the word spirits of the dead. We say dead. They are not dead. They are alive. Okay? They are alive. They are living. Their spirits are strong. Their spirits are potent. Their spirit is still alive. And you can feel those ancestral spirits swarm around you when you start getting involved in spiritistic ancestral practices. You can feel them. It's a real palpable feeling you get when you're doing these things. So that's why it's important for you when if you're starting out on your spiritual path, it's very important for you to start with your ancestors first, always. I'm going to tell you how you can start doing very simple ancestor veneration practices right now. Everyone should have an ancestor altar. Everyone should have a little small place in their house carved out for their dead, okay? Their ancestors. It can be on top of a shelf, at the top of a bookshelf. It can be on a mantle, it can be over the fireplace. You could have like a cabinet, and one of the parts of the cabinet could be dedicated to them. But the things that we put on the ancestor altar are pictures of deceased loved ones that we love, okay? Excuse me. We'll put out a glass of water, cool water. We'll put out, excuse me, oh my God, I'm going to go back to bed. We'll put out a candle, okay, a white candle. So putting out a white candle, a glass of water, and some pictures of people who had passed away. Don't put pictures of living people on your altar. It's a superstition, but don't put pictures of living people on your ancestor altar. You only put spirits of the dead on your altar, okay? And also you can put other knickknacks and things that are related to your family. Or let's say you don't have a close connection with your family, but you know what your cultural heritage is. Let's say if I'm predominantly African American or Black, I might choose to use imagery that's associated with where I know that my people originated from. If I did my ancestry DNA, and I know that I've got Ghana, or I know that I've got Nigeria, or I know that I've got Senegal, or I know that I've got Angola, you can kind of like use some of those inspirations, to make your ancestor reflect more like how you identify. If you're Irish, you can put out a Celtic cross, you can put out other things, but the whole purpose is that your ancestor altar should reflect you, and it should reflect your lineage. The ancestor altar is a place to meditate, it's a place to pray, and it's just a place to let the ancestors know that you have gratitude that they were alive. I'll tell you what the dead want more than anything else. The dead want representation, and the dead want acknowledgement. That's what spirits of the dead want. This is coming from a spiritualist and someone that's been practicing spiritism for 20 years. Spirits of the dead want to be seen and heard. They want to be acknowledged, and they want to be honored, and they want to be cared for, okay? Because your ancestors that are spirits now, that are still around, that exist in that quantum field, okay, they still have a very active role to play in your life. So hoodoo, to be honest with you, and Sophia is the queen of hoodoo, okay, around here, and our chief mother. Hoodoo is a word that was like used later on, because initially, like there wasn't such a specific definitions around like things. I do know that hoodoo could be a derivation of like voodoo. It also could come from some other places. I want to share some books with you right now, just so that you can see some books. I did pull out Mojo Workin. If you are interested in understanding the history of hoodoo, this is the book that you would want to read, Mojo Workin by Katrina Hazard Donald, The Old African American Hoodoo System. I'm showing this to people because this is the best book you can possibly read about hoodoo and its origins and where it comes from, in my opinion. Okay. The other one that is very, very good is called Botanica. Botanica by Joseph Murray, Sacred Spaces of Healing and Devotion in Urban America. So what happened in the 1940s and 50s is a lot of Hispanic people, especially from Cuba and Puerto Rico, started migrating up into New York and into the United States. My grandfather was one of those people, okay? A lot of my family lives in Puerto Rico, and they live in New York because they transitioned out of Puerto Rico and moved to New York. My grandfather joined the Merchant Marines, and that's where he met my grandmother when he was in the Navy, and landed in Hampton Roads, Virginia, in Norfolk, Virginia. So Botanica talks about how Espiritismo, Santeria, Orisha, and Ifa, and Voodoo, 21 divisions, made its way into the United States, because a lot of the ways that the tradition was preserved and these practices evolved in the United States was through Botanica culture, through spiritual practitioners that opened little shops to sell saint statues and candles and fixed candles and rosaries and incense and other herbs, spiritual washes and stuff. That's botanicas. And that was something that was proliferated by Hispanic people in the United States. This is where the spread of Lukumi comes from in the United States. And then there is Inganga, which is my book. This is a new book that I published very recently. It's called A Brief Introduction to Palo Religion. Okay, because I'm a scratched Palero, I was scratched into Palo Mayombe, which is a tradition that was very heavily practiced in Cuba and Puerto Rico. So Inganga is my latest work about the Palo religion in general. And that's a very, very good resource to understand more about like that practice. But these are the 3 book recommendations that I want to give you. like I said before, I had looked into some of these white people that had written books about folk magic in the United States, and they're so biased towards Wicca and paganism. They're not even worth mentioning, to be honest with you, because they're coming from like this white liberal place, and I don't like white liberals. y'all know I don't like white liberals, so I'm not even going to suggest it. It's not even worth it. Let's talk about Florida water. I'm going to show you how I make my homemade Florida water today, because it's fucking expensive to buy, and I refuse to buy Florida water out on the street. So if you go to Botanica, or you go to Hispanic Botanica or Bodega, that sells like spiritual supplies, Florida water, a little bottle of Florida water that looks like this is like $10. Could even be $15, depending on where you live. This Florida water is made by Goya. And you guys know Goya is this very, very large international foods company. Goya products are all over New England. And so if you go to grocery stores in New England, like Market Basket, that are in like predominantly Hispanic areas like Springfield or Lawrence, they will have Florida water on the shelf by the Goya products. And it's only $3. However, I like my homemade Florida water better, and I'm going to teach you how to use it. What is Florida water? Let's talk about that. If you don't know what Florida water is, how's it used? Florida water is a cologne. It's not water that you drink. This is a cologne. And it became very, very popular in the Caribbean. And it's a traditional cologne with cinnamon, orange, and floral scents, preferred for generations. This became very popular, and it's very good for bringing a medium back after they've been in possession or they've been mounted by spirit. So in Espiritismo, if a medium became possessed or hit by the Holy Spirit or whatever you want to call it, and go into some kind of trance or start doing mediumship, after the mediumship was over, to revive the medium or to help clean them off, okay, then Florida water would be put on the person. So one thing you can do to cleanse yourself off when you get home after work, after a hard day at work, or before you like go to your ancestor altar, you can keep your Florida water on your ancestor altar. And then usually what you'll see people do, you might see somebody sprinkle some Florida water around their altar, or they might put a little bit of Florida water in their hands, rub their hands together and rub them over the crown of the head, across the back of the neck, across the chest, down the torso, and up the back. Murray and Landman. Yeah. It was made in New York. Yeah. So it was made by two guys in New York. It is not closed. Florida water is not part of a closed practice. Anybody can use Florida water. It's just a cologne. It's a spiritual wash. It's become very, very popular as of late. But now what I'm going to show you is I've got this little plastic 4-ounce amber jar, or amber bottle. There's a little plastic amber bottle. 4-ounce amber plastic bottle. And what I'm going to do here right now is I'm going to take some good old vodka, and I'm going to fill this little container right here. I'm just going to put about a quarter of vodka in here. Just going to put like what would be like 2 shots of vodka in here. Okay, like 2 shots of vodka in my little container. And now here's the time in which I start talking about spiritual herbalism and medicinal herbalism. I went to Target the other day, and I was walking around. I had to pick up my drugs, my medication. And I was walking around in the kitchen part. And I found a spice rack that was on sale. Look, this is a spice rack. This was a little spice rack I found at Target. It was on sale for like $16. It's like usually $25, but it was like marked down. You might be able to find them at you might be able to go to Target and get one for yourself. Okay. So it's got a handle on it, which I love, but this is sitting in my, so I have many altars, but my working altar, I wanted to have some kind of shelving or something just to keep spiritual products that I use frequently. Look, all of my army of essential oils fit in the bottom of this. And then up here, I've got some very potent incense that I use specifically for spiritual practices. I've got like a rosary, and I've got an Anglican prayer bead that I use to pray with, because I do pray the rosary. I do Anglican prayers. And then I've got some herb, like smokable herb. I keep my herb there now. And then I've got like my magical salt and some other things. But I would recommend that you get something like this to put on your working altar, because it's great. Now, here's the other thing you might not know about me. The other thing you might not know about me is that I'm a clinically certified aromatherapist. I went through an entire aromatherapy program to become an aromatherapist. Okay, so aromatherapy is very, very important to me. Essential oils are very important to me, and essential oils are magical oils. No matter what any motherfucker on TikTok or the internet says, essential oils are magical oils because they're plants, and plants are magical, and the core of root work is plants, not shit oils that are made with synthetic fragrances in botanicas. And a magical oil that is constructed for magical purposes is usually a combination of herbs, essential oils, and some other kinds of oils, or materials that are put in the oils, okay, in order to give them their magical effects. But magical oils, essential oils are magical oils. Their essential oils are the most volatile aspects of the plant. They're potent. Essential oils are actually more potent for me, magically and spiritually, than the regular plant or the dried plant. So my recommendation for you is, if you really want to get into some spiritual root working and some real spiritual and medicinal herbalism, you become a master of essential oils, because they can do a lot of things. Essential oils go great right into your baths, your spiritual baths. So what I got over here for my homemade Florida water is I'm looking at, you like the spice rack, Zen? So I use 4 essential oils in my my Florida water. I use bergamot, which is orange, clove, cinnamon leaf, and because I love the smell of frankincense, I use just a couple of drops of frankincense. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to do half a milliliter of these 3 oils. So this is a dropper bottle, and this is 1 milliliter, okay, in the dropper. Half of that milliliter comes out to about 10 drops of oil. So I want to do a half a mil, or about 8 to 10 drops of oil of each one of these. So I'm going to just dose out for myself half a mil of bergamot. Oh, it smells so good. Some clove makes it nice and spicy. Some cinnamon leaf. And now I'm just going to put a few drops of frankincense, because frankincense is also very good for protection, and it just smells great. So I'm going to show you a couple of other essential oils to use in your magic that I use quite frequently, like a way to attract the dead and spirits. So now what I got here is I've got about 2 shots of alcohol. I'll probably end up talking about hydrosols and hydrosol making in our spiritual mentorship program. So now what I've got here is I've got my essential oils and my vodka. And now I'm just going to take some spring water and I'm going to put some spring water. I'm not going to do this right now, but I'm going to get some bottled water, some spring water or some distilled water. And I'm going to fill the rest of this bottle up with water. And that's going to be my Florida water. And it smells fantastic. It smells great. You don't want to use tap water. You want to use some kind of spring water. Now, some other oils that I like to use for summoning the dead or calling the dead, 2 great essential oils to use are frankincense and myrrh. And if you want to use something with your frankincense and myrrh, then you can use sandalwood or vetiver. The dead love it. The dead love frankincense and myrrh, sandalwood and vetiver. That's what I have found to be true when summoning spirits of the dead. And we need to talk about summoning spirits of the dead in a second. I'm going to get there. Something I love to do, not only to refresh myself when I'm getting ready to pray and meditate, but I love, love, love putting a few drops of rose geranium and patchouli into my palm. And I'm going to do that right now. One of the things I like to do, who is this? Hey, Bobo. I put bergamot, clove, cinnamon leaf, and a few drops of frankincense. Don't look at my hair, everybody. I look a mess. But when I'm getting ready to pray, I like to take I put a few drops of patchouli in my palms because it's fine to put essential oils in your palm. I put a few drops of rose geranium and I rub my hands together and I put my hands over my face and I inhale. And I run my hands through my hair and the back of the neck and across my chest, down my torso, up my rear end, and down my arms. That's how I clean myself off and prepare for prayer. That's my anointing oil. Rose geranium and patchouli smell so good together. I don't know if you've ever done that before. Sophia put patchouli and rose geranium together, but it is heavenly. It's a heavenly smell. So I'm going to put those back. And I'm just going to show you one more thing. I'm going to show you the essential oils that I put in a spiritual bath. If I need to make a quick spiritual bath and clean myself off because, let's say, I don't know, some witch bitch on the internet is trying to cast magic against me, I'll make a spiritual bath with coconut milk, with some, I'll put some Colonia in there, Colonia 1800. I'll put a little bit of salt. And then I can put 3 essential oils in there and I can make myself a very, very quick, fast and easy spiritual bath. It's a down and dirty, fast, easy spiritual bath. You should have a protocol to clean yourself off spiritually quickly. You shouldn't have to go through some huge, big, blown out ceremony in order to clean yourself off. Very, very easy to clean yourself off. You'll learn about that in our spiritual mentorship program. But I like to use, when I'm doing spiritual cleansings on myself, I like to use hyssop, basil, sweet basil, and camphor. These 3 together make a great, very powerful curse-breaking, hex-breaking, jinx-breaking, spirit removal, spiritual bath. You're not a big fan of patchouli? That's okay. I've always liked it. There's a lot of people that don't like it. But some hyssop. Hyssop has been used even since biblical times and beyond for purification. There are scriptures in the Bible and the Psalms that say, purify me with hyssop, you know? And so hyssop has always been considered to be a very purifying plant. If you incorporate the Bible into your practices, which I don't really use the Bible, I do pray, but I don't necessarily pull out the Bible and quote scriptures. But I do a lot of prayer work, a lot of praying. and a lot of energy work as part of my spiritual medicinal practices and my spiritual herbalism. So camphor essential oil is great. And then also in finality, I also really love using rosemary and sage. Rosemary and sage together are great if you're putting together, let's say, a salve or a balm. B-A-L-M, balm, a balm. So we're going to have a spiritual mentorship program starting Thursday. Thursday night is the first night, our first meeting, and the church's Discord server for spiritual mentorship. If you're interested in spiritual mentorship, send me a private message in our Discord server. We're going to start learning about essential oils. It is my favorite thing in the world, and we're going to start learning about those things. All right. So when I'm talking about folk magic practices and I'm talking about spiritual herbalism and medicinal herbalism, that's exactly what I mean. Because in reality, to be a folk magic practitioner, you should understand herbs. You should understand astrology in the sense that you should understand the phases of the moon. You should understand your natal chart, okay, your zodiac. Those are things that are very important in traditional folk magic practices, in European folk magic practices specifically, with the astrology part. and making medicines. And when I say making medicines, I mean making herbal teas, being able to dress a candle with herbs, using essential oils, being able to make spiritual baths and washes. These are all things that are traditional. These are all things that are based in folk magic. And it really doesn't matter what your spiritual orientation is, to be honest. It doesn't matter if you're a Christian or a Muslim. Doesn't matter if you're hoodoo or cunning craft. Doesn't matter if you're Catholic or Protestant. The things that I'm going to be teaching and the things that Sophia is going to teach, if she shows up to give a word to y'all on a Thursday night, is going to be based in understanding herbs and understanding plants and understanding the spiritual properties of plants and herbs. I'm all about herbs. That is what I'm about. I am all about magical and medicinal herbalism. If you are interested in a book on magical and medicinal herbalism, my book, Bruja Orion's Book of Magical and Medicinal Herbalism, is available on Amazon. I'm not trying to promote myself. However, I'm not trying to send you to some other motherfucker to learn what they have to say. If you are not a member of our private Discord server, the link should be in the description of this video. Our Discord server is a community server. And if you want to financially contribute to support our church's work, and you want to get something out of it, also learn, study, then you can become a member by becoming a subscriber. It's a monthly subscription. You can cancel anytime you want, and you can reenact it anytime you want. But that server subscription basically is going to be what funds me and Sophia's church. Okay, so if you love us and you want to support us, you can be a subscriber and pledge $20 a month to our work. That would be way appreciated. It's very important for us to have subscribers to be able to pay for all of this stuff. Okay, and then also, you're not just given $20, for nothing. You can show up any Thursday night between 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and 10 or 11, because once I go live, I talk for several hours and hang out, have coffee with us, have a donut, and talk about spirituality, talk about anything that you want to talk about, including learning how to make stuff. Because every Thursday night, I'm going to be going into something that has to do with, spiritual baths are going to be where we start. We're going to start with spiritual baths. We're going to do a couple of Thursday nights talking about spiritual baths, how to make a love bath, how to make a curse, hex, jinx breaking bath, how to make a money bath. So spiritual baths are very, very important. Yay. How exciting is that? I hope that the information I gave today was helpful. It was a little awkward today. I don't know why. I had a hard time getting going in the beginning. I hope the information, I hope you make your own homemade Florida water. Stop buying shit from Botanicas and stop buying shit from Amazon. Everyone should, for the most part, if you live in an urban area or a community, you should have a health food store. Like we've got the River Valley Co-op, which is around the corner from my house. It's like the health food store. Most health food stores have a section with loose herbs where you can get the Ziploc baggie or the little paper baggie, and you can scoop the amount of herbs that you want into your bag. So for me, I'm going to show you exactly what I mean. I was just getting organized with my spiritual cabinet the other day, but you see these little baggies? These little baggies, there's like, I don't know how many are here, but these are herbs that I use in magic. So whenever I'm going to do some kind of magical working, if I don't have the materials that I need, like the herbs, I will run down to the River Valley Co-op and I will get enough herbs to do that spell, or maybe like enough to do that spell and a little bit left over to do another spell. So my herbs that I use in magic are separate from like herbs that I will use like in herbal teas. I'll use the same herbs, but I'm saying like I will have them separated. Like I have stuff that is food quality, stuff that I ingest in my kitchen with all the other food. And then if I have certain herbs that I like to use in spell casting, then I'll just get a little bit of the herb, and I'll keep them in. They're in my little shelf underneath my sexy and cute little apothecary, Ryan's little apothecary over here. So anyway, thank you so much. I want to bless you. Can I bless you? I'd like to give you a blessing. I'd like to say a prayer. I'd like to pray for you. Now, you guys know that I am an Awo. I am fully initiated in Ifa. I am an Oshun priest, and my cosmology and my spirituality is based in Ifa. So I'm going to say a prayer that is going to be more directed towards Yoruba entities. But, this is a blessing that I want to give you. To everybody, I want to give praise, honor, and glory to Oludumare, Olorun, the owner of all possible outcomes, the owner of the pot that's never exhausted. I want to give praise, honor, and glory to Ifa, Orunmila, Orula, the Orisha of divination and prophecy, the Orisha that makes good destinies, Ela, the Holy Spirit. I want to give praise, honor, and glory to the Supreme Divine Mother of the Yoruba people, Oshun, my mother. May Oshun bless you. May Oshun always make everything you taste sweet. May she bring you all the good things in life. May she bring you all the money and all the wealth. May she give you all the fertility to have as many children as you want. May the spirit of Oshun rest on you and comfort you in your time of need. I'm going to give praise, honor, and glory to Eshu, Eshu Elegbar, the man that stands at the crossroads, the one who travels back and forth between us and God to deliver our messages, okay? He is karma. He is the one that shows us the way, closes off the paths that you shouldn't walk down, opens up the ways that you should walk down. I want to give praise, honor, and glory to all of the Iyami, the Ajay Iyami, the primordial mothers, the mothers of creation. I want to give praise, honor, and glory to the Egungun, who are our ancestors by blood, our Egungun, who are our blood ancestors, and our Egbe, who are our spiritual companions in heaven, our spiritual tribe, our soulmates that walk with us through this life. I want to say that I hope that you have a wonderful rest of the Sunday, and I hope that you guys take the information that you got today and you use it, and that you also come over to our Discord, our church's Discord, and hang out with us and study under us and learn how to continue to keep these practices alive in a traditional way and not in a bullshit TikTok way. Ashe, 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 Amen, amen, and amen. All right, y'all. I hope you have a great rest of the day. I'll see you, Zen. Send me a message on Discord, okay? Bye, guys. Bye.